The day Sarah and Liko arrived was like a scene from an old science fiction novel, except it was real, unfolding right outside my front door. The sky was painted a brilliant shade of twilight blue, with streaks of gold fading into the horizon as the setting sun cast long shadows across the street. I had waited weeks for this moment, filled with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. When I first saw the ad about hiring intergalactic help aliens seeking work as maids on Earth, I thought it was some sort of joke. But the agency had been legitimate. And now, as a sleek silver transport shuttle descended quietly into my front yard, the reality of my decision finally hit home. The shuttle landed with a gentle hum, its metallic surface gleaming under the dimming sunlight, so the hatch opened with a hiss, releasing a faint mist that swirled around the figures emerging from inside. The first to step out was Sarah. Her appearance was nothing short of otherworldly. She stood tall and graceful, with iridescent skin that seemed to shimmer subtly with every movement, like the light reflecting off water. Her hair, a deep blue-black, cascaded down her back in waves, catching the last rays of sunlight as if each strand held a touch of starlight. Her eyes, a deep amethyst shade, sparkled with curiosity as she took in her surroundings. Following her was Liko, who had a softer presence, though no less captivating. She was shorter than Sarah, with delicate features that gave her an air of innocence. Her skin glowed faintly, a soft turquoise tint that seemed to shift under the fading light. Her hair, unlike Sarah's, was silvery white, tied back in a loose braid that fell over her shoulder. Her eyes, a bright jade green, widened as she looked around, as if taking in Earth for the first time. I felt a strange mix of awe and nervousness watching them approach. My fingers tightened around the edges of my shirt. This wasn't just another set of maids stepping into my life. These were beings from another galaxy, creatures whose cultures, experiences, and perceptions were likely to be far beyond anything I could imagine. "Greetings," Sarah said, her voice smooth and melodic. "You must be our employer. I am Sarah, and this is Liko. We are pleased to be at your service." Liko nodded enthusiastically. "Hello, we're still learning Earth languages, so please be patient with us if we make mistakes." I managed to smile, feeling a little self-conscious under their gaze. "Welcome to Earth and well to my home. It's nice to meet you both. I'm looking forward to getting to know you, and to seeing how you adapt to life here." I could see their gazes darting curiously around the yard, taking in the flowers lining the walkway and the quaint charm of the brick house. It wasn't much, just a simple 2-story home in the suburbs, but it was mine, and now it was about to be shared with these 2 alien visitors. The first week was a mix of excitement and chaos. I had no idea how much humans took for granted the understanding of basic household tasks. Even something as simple as cooking dinner turned into an adventure when Sarah and Liko tried to help. On their 3rd day, they attempted to make spaghetti. Liko stirred the pasta with great enthusiasm, but Sarah, unfamiliar with Earth's concept of flavor, had poured almost half a jar of chili flakes into the sauce. The resulting dish was fiery enough to set my mouth ablaze. Their worried expressions when I choked and sputtered were sincere, but I couldn't help but laugh once the burning sensation in my throat subsided. "I'm sorry," Liko exclaimed, her cheeks flushing a deeper shade of blue. "We read that humans enjoy spicy food, but we didn't realize it could be overwhelming." "It's definitely overwhelming," I said with a cough, my eyes watering, "but don't worry, we'll work on it together." These little incidents became a routine and amusing mix of miscommunication and cultural exchange. Sarah, for her part, was fascinated by the mundane details of Earth life. She could spend hours staring at toasters, scoring in that toaster, mesmerized by the way it heated bread to just the right crispness. Liko was more of a tactile learner, and I often found her gently poking at things, her wide eyes filled with wonder. Once she spent almost an entire afternoon rearranging the books on my shelves, categorizing them not by genre or author, by how friendly their covers seemed to her. Our interactions gradually evolved beyond their duties. There were quiet moments in the evenings when we would sit together and I'd explain human customs, trying my best to answer their seemingly endless questions. The more I talked, the more I realized how complex our world must appear to them, and how much I took my own experiences for granted. We talked about everything: food, music, art, even Earth's concept of time, which they found utterly perplexing. "For us," Sarah explained one night as she absent-mindedly traced a pattern on the wooden table, "time is not linear like it is for you. It's more of a sensation, a flow. We don't measure it with clocks or calendars. It's just there." I watched her as she spoke, her amethyst eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. There was a strange elegance to the way she spoke, a haze she spoke, on mystery in every word. Liko, sitting beside her, nodded in agreement, but her expression was more focused on me than on the concept of time. As the days turned into weeks, something subtle but undeniable began to unfold between us. At first it was just small things, the way Liko's hand would brush against mine when we passed each other in the hallway, or the way Sarah's gaze would linger a moment longer than necessary when I spoke. I started to notice how my heart seemed to skip a beat when I caught their smiles or when they laughed at my terrible attempts to teach them Earth jokes. It was hard to say when exactly the flirtation began. It might have been that day when I showed Liko how to plant flowers in the garden and she looked up at me, her face lit up with a joy so genuine that it took my breath away. Or perhaps it was during one of the late-night conversations with Sarah, when her curiosity about human emotions seemed to go beyond mere academic interests, becoming something far more personal. There was no denying it, an unspoken attraction was developing between us. I could feel it in the charged air whenever we were alone together, and I saw it in their subtle but growing boldness. It was a new kind of tension, one I had never experienced before. Still, I wondered how much of what I was sensing was real and how much was just my own wishful thinking. After all, Sarah and Liko were from another galaxy. Could they really understand human emotions? Did they feel the same way about me as I was beginning to feel about them? I was too cautious to broach the subject directly, fearing that I might misunderstand their behaviors due to our cultural differences. So I kept my feelings to myself, though the signs were everywhere. And as the first month drew to a close, I couldn't help but feel that something big was looming just over the horizon, something that would change not only our living arrangements but our very understanding of each other. The days after that evening seemed to take on a different rhythm, a quiet but undeniable change weaving itself into the fabric of our lives. Sarah, Liko, and I continued with our daily routines, cleaning, cooking, and learning more about one another, but there was now an unspoken understanding, a shared secret that lingered in every touch and glance. The boundaries between us had shifted, and we were learning to navigate this new landscape of closeness. Yet, for all our shared experiences, there were still moments when our cultural differences caught us off guard, highlighting just how far apart our worlds truly were. One such moment came unexpectedly on a warm afternoon when the sun shone brightly through the windows, casting intricate patterns of light across the hardwood floors. I had been feeling the weariness of a long day pressing down on me, so I decided to take a bath, letting the hot water ease the tension from my muscles. The sound of the running water filled the bathroom, accompanied by the comforting scent of lavender as I added a generous amount of bubble bath. As the steam began to rise and swirl around me, I sank into the water and closed my eyes, letting the heat seep into my skin and relax my body. Just as I was beginning to lose myself in the soothing warmth, the bathroom door creaked open. Startled, I glanced up to see Sarah and Liko standing in the doorway, their expressions a mix of confusion and surprise. It took me a moment to realize that I hadn't locked the door behind me, and by then, the awkwardness had already settled over us like a thick fog. I could see the flicker of hesitation in their eyes, the way they looked at me, then at each other, as if unsure whether they should step forward or retreat. "I didn't realize you were in here," Sarah said slowly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Her lavender-tinted cheeks flushed a deeper hue, a faint sign of embarrassment that I was learning to recognize. Liko seemed equally taken aback, her gaze darting between me and the bubbling water. "We thought it was time to clean the bathroom," she added quickly, her tone almost apologetic. I swallowed hard, my body still submerged up to my shoulders in the hot sauna hat-scented water. "No, it's fine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the tension tightening in my chest. "Just, maybe knock next time?" The words sounded almost absurd the moment they left my mouth, and I could see a flicker of confusion pass over Jera's face. It was a reminder of how foreign the concept of privacy was to them. In their culture, where communal living was the norm and physical boundaries were often blurred, walking in on someone during a bath might not have held the same implications it did on Earth. Sarah's eyes widened as she seemed to grasp the nature of my discomfort. "We apologize," she said, her voice softer now. "We did not intend to intrude." Liko quickly nodded in agreement, her cheeks darkening with a faint turquoise blush. "We'll be more careful," she promised, and with a hurried step back, she reached for the door handle. But just as the door began to swing shut, Sarah hesitated, her gaze flicked back toward me, lingering for a moment longer than seemed necessary. There was something in her eyes, curiosity maybe, or perhaps even a hint of longing, that sent a shiver down my spine despite the warmth of the water. So before I could read too deeply into it, she closed the door with a quiet click, leaving me alone once again. The incident, small as it was, left a lasting impression. That evening, after the house had fallen into a gentle hush, I found myself sitting in the living room with Sarah and Liko. The air was thick with a sense of unfinished conversation, as if the earlier encounter had opened a door that none of us knew quite how to close. It was Sarah who broke the silence first, her voice steady but laced with a note of curiosity. "You seemed uncomfortable earlier," she said, her gaze fixed on me, "when we walked in on you." I took a slow breath, choosing my words carefully. "It's just humans are different when it comes to things like that. We value privacy, especially in situations where we're vulnerable." I could feel my cheeks warming at the explanation, but I pushed forward. "Being seen while bathing is considered intimate." Sarah nodded slowly, as if processing the idea, her expression thoughtful. I see. We have little concept of privacy in our culture, at least not in the same way. Bathing is often a communal activity, and there is no shame in it. She tilted her head slightly, her amethyst eyes shimmering with a hint of mischief. But I can understand why it might feel different for you. Liko, who had been listening quietly, leaned forward with a glimmer of curiosity in her eyes. So you feel exposed? She asked, her tone earnest. It's a strange thing for us to consider. Her question was simple, yet it cut to the heart of the matter in a way that caught me off guard. There was a frankness to her words that made me pause, searching for the right way to explain. Yes, I said finally. It's not just about being seen, it's about feeling safe in a vulnerable moment. Liko nodded thoughtfully, her fingers lightly drumming against the arm of the chair. I think I understand, she murmured. But there is something else, isn't there? Something that made the moment different. The weight of her gaze settled over me, and I found myself unable to look away. There was a softness in her expression, a hint of understanding that seemed to reach beyond words. Sara's presence, too, felt closer than ever, as though we were all three balanced on the edge of something unseen but deeply felt. Yes, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. There is something else, something between us. For a moment, silence stretched out, fragile and delicate as a thread. Then Sara leaned closer, her gaze never leaving mine. We have felt it too, she confessed, her tone low and intimate. It's not merely curiosity, it's something stronger, something we cannot ignore. Her words hung in the air like a spark waiting to ignite. I could feel the shift, the subtle change in the way we looked at each other, the way our breaths seemed to synchronize. It was as though the earlier incident had torn down the last remaining barrier, leaving us exposed not just physically but emotionally as well. The intensity of the moment was undeniable, and we all sensed that we were at a crossroads, a point from which there would be no turning back. Liko, always the bolder of the two, took my hand in hers, her touch warm and reassuring. If there is something more, she said softly, then we should not be afraid to explore it. Whatever this connection is, it's worth understanding. And I looked down at our joined hands, then back up at her and Sarah. There was a silent agreement in their eyes, a shared understanding that whatever path we chose, we'd take it together. The warmth of Liko's hand and the steady gaze of Sarah's amethyst eyes seemed to draw me forward, urging me to cross that final line. Slowly, tentatively, I reached out to brush a strand of hair from Sara's face, my fingers lingering against her skin. Her breath caught, and for a heartbeat, time seemed to hold still. It was Liko who closed the distance, leaning in to press her lips to mine, her kiss gentle and curious, as though tasting a new experience for the first time. The sensation was electrifying, sending a rush of warmth through me, and when she pulled back, Sarah was there, her touch soft against my cheek, as she leaned in to kiss me as well. What followed was a quiet, unfolding intimacy, a slow exploration of new boundaries. We took our time, letting each touch, each kiss build upon the last. There was no rush, no urgency, only a deep, shared desire to understand this connection between us, to savor the closeness we had found. It was not merely a physical act, it was a mutual unveiling, a deepening of the bond that had been forming since the day they arrived. As the night wore on, we found ourselves entwined on the couch, our bodies and hearts closer than they'd ever been before. There was a profound sense of unity, as though we were no longer three separate beings, but one bound together by something far stronger than mere attraction. It was a beginning, an intimate promise of what was yet to come. And as we lay there, the room illuminated only by the soft glow of the moonlight filtering through the curtains, I knew that whatever lay ahead, we would face it together. There was no more hesitation, no more uncertainty, only the thrilling, intoxicating feeling of having crossed the line and found something extraordinary on the other side. The night we first crossed the line marked the beginning of a new chapter in our lives, yet it didn't so much change things as reveal a truth that had been simmering beneath the surface all along. In the days that followed, we fell into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural, as though our new closeness had always been there, waiting to be acknowledged. Sarah, Liko, and I went about our routines much as we had before, tidying the house, cooking meals, and sharing our thoughts about the curious customs of Earth, but there was now an underlying current that ran through everything we did, a shared understanding that was both thrilling and a little terrifying. I found myself watching them more closely than ever, noticing the small, intimate details that I had previously overlooked. The way Sarah would absently tuck a strand of hair behind her ear when she was lost in thought, her amethyst eyes distant and contemplative, or how Liko's expression would brighten whenever she discovered something new, her joy so pure that it made me smile even if the discovery was something as simple as the peculiar taste of earthly fruits. These details took on new meaning, deepening the connection we shared. Despite our unspoken agreement to let things develop naturally, I couldn't help but wonder if we should talk about what had happened, if we needed to define it, to understand where we stood and what we were becoming. It was a question that lingered at the back of my mind, growing heavier with each passing day. I sensed that they too felt it, the way Sarah would sometimes look at me with a quiet question in her eyes, or how Liko's touches seemed to carry an unspoken request for something more. Eventually, I knew the moment to confront these feelings would come, and when it did, it arrived quietly, without preamble, like a gentle breeze that slipped in through the open window one evening. We were in the living room, the three of us sprawled on the couch, the room dimly lit by the soft amber glow of the floor lamp. It was one of those evenings when the world outside seemed distant and unreal, when the quiet companionship between us was all that mattered. Liko was curled up beside me, her head resting on my shoulder, while Sarah sat at the other end, her legs tucked beneath her and the book in her lap, though she had long since stopped reading. The warmth of Liko's body against mine and the comfortable silence we shared made me feel as though we were all part of some secret, unspoken story. I broke the silence first, the words tumbling out before I could second-guess myself. "I think we need to talk about us," I said, my voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in my chest. Sarah looked up from her book, a faint curiosity lighting her eyes. Liko shifted beside me, her hand moving to rest lightly on my arm. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone gentle, as though coaxing out the truth she sensed I was hesitant to share. "I mean about what happened," I said, my gaze moving between them. "That night when we crossed the line, I know we all felt something, but we haven't really talked about what it means or what we want this to be." So a moment there was silence, the kind that is heavy with meaning. Sarah closed her book and placed it on the coffee table, turning her full attention to me. "You're right," she said softly. "We haven't spoken about it, but that doesn't mean it wasn't important." Liko nodded in agreement, her green eyes wide and earnest. "It was more than just a moment," she added. "I think we all knew it. It felt significant." I took a deep breath, relieved by their openness. I felt it too, I confess, my voice quieter now. "But I don't know what it means for us. I don't want to assume anything, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page." Sarah's gaze softened, her expression thoughtful. "In our culture," she began, "relationships do not always follow a defined path. Bonds are formed based on connection, mutual understanding, and shared experiences. There is no single way to be together. It is about discovering what feels right, what strengthens the bond." Liko leaned closer, her fingers brushing mine lightly. "We don't have to put a name to it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What matters is how we feel. And I know I feel closer to you than I've ever felt to anyone." Their words resonated with me, easing some of the uncertainty that had been weighing on my mind. There was a truth to what they were saying, a simplicity in letting the relationship be whatever it naturally became. We didn't need labels or definitions, just a willingness to explore this newfound closeness with honesty and openness. I reached out, taking both of their hands in mine, feeling the warmth of their touch. "I don't need a label either," I said, my voice steady. "I just want to make sure that we're all comfortable with where this is heading, and that we're not holding back because of fear or doubt." Sarah's lips curved into a small, reassuring smile. "Fear has no place between us," she said gently. "Only understanding." Liko's fingers tightened around mine. "And trust," she added. "We trust you and each other. That's what makes this special." As we sat there, hands intertwined, it felt as though a weight had lifted from my chest. We didn't need to have everything figured out, we just needed to be present, to let our relationship evolve naturally, guided by the bond that had drawn us together. It was a decision made not with words, but with a shared look, a mutual understanding that resonated between us like a silent promise. So the days that followed were a blend of the familiar and the new, an intricate dance of learning to balance our deepening relationship with the practicalities of everyday life. Sarah and Liko still performed their duties around the house, but there was a softness, an intimacy in the way we moved around each other, as if each touch or glance carried a hidden meaning. So the boundary between work and affection had blurred, but in a way that felt natural rather than chaotic. That we'd established a rhythm, an unspoken agreement to take things slowly, to savor the closeness we were cultivating. Our nights often ended in the living room, or sometimes in the garden where we would lay beneath the stars, letting the cool night air wash over us. There was a comfort in these moments, a feeling of belonging that wrapped around us like a warm blanket. Sometimes, Sarah would tell me stories from her home, galaxy tales of ancient travelers who navigated the stars without ships, using only their minds to guide them across the endless expanse. Her voice was melodic, filled with a quiet wonder that made the universe seem alive, its mysteries within reach. Liko, meanwhile, would share stories of her own, hers were more about the small joys she remembered from her life before coming to Earth, the strange bioluminescent flora of her planet, the songs that were sung in her village during the long nights, and the simple pleasures of swimming in the cool waters of moonlit lakes. She would speak with a wistfulness that made me long to see these places for myself, to understand the worlds from which they came. As we shared our stories, I couldn't help but marvel at the vastness of their experiences and the ways our lives had intertwined. It felt like a miracle, this meeting of worlds, a serendipitous alignment of stars that had brought us together in this small corner of the galaxy. But for all the sweetness in our newfound intimacy, there was a moments of uncertainty, of questions that loomed like shadows in the corners of my mind. What did this relationship mean, the future for mine? Were we building something that could last, or were we merely caught up in a beautiful, fleeting moment that would eventually fade? These questions lingered unasked but ever present, and I could sense that Sarah and Liko sometimes felt them too. And there was a quietness in their eyes during the rare moments, solitude, as if they were contemplating the same unspoken fears. One evening as we sat in the garden, I decided to voice the thoughts that had been stirring inside me for some time. The night was cool, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the nearby trees. The stars shone brightly above, a reminder of the vastness of the universe and how small we were in comparison. I've been thinking, I began, my voice barely audible above the rustling wind, about what happens next, about us and whether this can be more than just a moment in time. Shara and Liko both looked at me, their expressions open but guarded, as though they had anticipated this conversation. Sora was the first to respond, her voice steady and calm. We have wondered the same thing, she admitted. Our time here on Earth was meant to be temporary, but we did not expect to find something so meaningful. Liko nodded, a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. It's not just about where we're from or where we are, she said softly. It's about what we're willing to do to stay together. I felt a lump rise in my throat, my heart swelling with a mixture of hope and fear. I want you both to stay, I said, the words tumbling out with more force than I intended. I don't know how it would work or what it would mean, but I don't want this to end. The silence that followed was filled with the weight of possibilities of decisions yet to be made. Daxara and Liko exchanged a glance, a silent conversation passing between them. When they turned back to me, there was a resolve in their eyes that hadn't been there before. We will find a way, Sarah said, her voice strong and clear. If staying is what we all desire, then we will make it happen. Liko reached for my hand, her touch warm and reassuring. We're not afraid of what lies ahead, she whispered, as long as we face it together. In that moment, beneath the canopy of stars, I felt an overwhelming sense of certainty. We had crossed the line, but it wasn't a step taken into uncertainty. It was a step toward a future we would shape together, regardless of where it might lead. The connection we shared wasn't bound by the rules of any one world. It was a bond that transcended galaxies, a promise that was made in the quiet whispers of the night and sealed with the light of 1,000 distant suns. The decision to stay together, to make this relationship work against all odds, breathed new life into our days. There was a renewed energy in the air, a quiet determination that permeated every moment, every touch. Yet with the hope also came the realization that we would have to navigate a path that was largely uncharted, full of challenges we hadn't yet imagined. We were three beings from different worlds trying to create a shared life, and the logistics of merging our lives together proved to be both simpler and more complex than I had anticipated. There were practical matters that needed our attention. For one, Sarah and Liko had originally come to Earth on a temporary work visa, an agreement between interstellar travel agencies and Earth's government that allowed for short-term contracts. The terms had been clear. They were to stay no longer than a year before returning to their home galaxy, but that agreement had not accounted for the bonds that might form, for the lives that could intertwine. If we wanted to stay together, we would have to find a way to extend their stay or change their status altogether. The bureaucratic process was daunting, full of forms, approvals, and meetings with officials who viewed interspecies relationships as curious novelties at best and complications at worst. But the complications were not just bureaucratic. The dynamics of our relationship were evolving, and with that came the need to redefine roles. Sarah and Liko were still officially my maids, and while the tasks of cooking, cleaning, and general household upkeep still took place, there was an unspoken shift in how these activities were approached. I felt a subtle discomfort in having them perform these tasks. Now that we were romantically involved, the line between professional duties and personal affection blurred more with each passing day. It was not an arrangement that fit into any traditional mold, and we all struggled to find a balance that felt right. One evening, as we sat together in the living room after dinner, I decided to bring up the topic. The warm light of the fireplace cast a flickering glow across the room, creating a feeling of intimacy that made it easier to speak honestly. I've been thinking, I began my tone cautious about your roles here. I don't want you to feel like you're just working for me anymore. Things have changed between us, and I think we need to acknowledge that. Sarah's gaze met mine, steady and thoughtful. We have felt the shift too, she said, but this has always been more than just a job for us. We came here seeking experiences, growth, and we found something far deeper. Liko, sitting beside me, took my hand in hers. Her touch was reassuring as she spoke. "We don't mind helping around the house," she said, her tone sincere. "It makes us feel like we're contributing to this life we're building together. But if it makes you uncomfortable, then perhaps we can change the way we do things." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "I think we should share the responsibilities," I suggested. "Not as a job, but as something we do for each other. We're a family now, or at least we're trying to be. It shouldn't be about who is responsible for what." Sarah's lips curved into a small, approving smile. "A shared life," she murmured, as if testing the words on her tongue. "Yes, I believe that is what we are striving for." And so we made small changes, subtle shifts that reflected the evolving nature of our relationship. We cooked meals together, turning what had once been a mundane task into an enjoyable shared experience. Cleaning the house became a kind of ritual, a way to mark the passing of days, to put things in order, not just in the physical sense, but as a reflection of our emotional landscape. Each chore became a reminder of the choices we were making, of the life we were trying to carve out amidst the complexities of our worlds. As weeks turned into months, the question of what came next loomed larger. The time we had was limited. If we didn't find a way to secure their legal stay on Earth, Sarah and Liko would eventually be forced to return to their home galaxy. I found myself increasingly preoccupied with the thought of losing them, of having this beautiful and probable love story cut short by rules and borders that but shakes so trivial in the grander scheme of the universe. There were options, but none of them simple. One was to apply for a permanent residency, a process that involved proving that Sarah and Liko had essential skills or cultural value that justified their continued stay on Earth. Another option was marriage, which would grant them legal status as my partners. But even this was complicated by the fact that interspecies marriages were still rare and often scrutinized by officials who didn't understand the depth of such bonds. The thought of proposing marriage had crossed my mind several times, but there were doubts that kept me from voicing it. Did it feel right to suggest marriage as a solution to a bureaucratic problem? Did it cheapen the love we shared to use it as a means to an end? I was not sure, and so the words stayed lodged in my throat, unspoken, though I sensed that both Sarah and Liko knew they were there. One night, as we lay under the open sky in the garden, gazing up at the stars, the conversation turned to the future. The air was cool, carrying with it the faint scent of the flowers we had planted weeks ago. The moon hung low, casting a silver light across the grass, and for a moment, it felt as though we were the only beings in the universe, floating on a sea of starlight. "I keep thinking about what happens if we can't stay," I said quietly, my voice carrying a hint of the worry I had tried to keep hidden. "What if we can't find a way?" Sarah's fingers brushed lightly against my cheek, her touch as delicate as the moonlight. "We will find a way," she said, a gentle certainty in her voice, "even if it means finding another world to call home." Liko's hand slipped into mine, her grip reassuringly firm. "We didn't come to Earth just for the experience," she added. "We came to find something meaningful, and we did. We found you. That's worth fighting for." The emotion that rose in my chest was almost overwhelming, a mixture of relief and love and the ever-present fear of the unknown. "Then, if it came to it," I ventured, the words tasting unfamiliar on my tongue, "would you consider marriage? If that's what it took to stay together?" There was a moment of quiet, as if the stars themselves were holding their breath, and Sarah leaned closer, her gaze soft but intense. "Marriage in our cultures is not the same as it is here," she said. "It is not simply a legal agreement. It is a binding of souls, a promise to share one's life and spirit. If that is what we must do, then it is not a burden, it is an honor." Liko's eyes sparkled with emotion as she nodded. "We would be proud to take that step with you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It would not be just a means to stay, it would be a declaration of what we already know, that we belong together." The certainty in their voices soothed the doubts that had clouded my mind. In that moment, the weight of our decision lifted, and I felt a newfound clarity. It wasn't about the legality of it or the practicalities, it was about making a promise, a vow that transcended laws and boundaries. It was about the life we were building together, and the willingness to fight for it, to embrace whatever came next. In the days that followed, we began the preparations for marriage, unlike any other. We chose not to involve any elaborate ceremonies or formalities, as the union was to be a deeply personal one, rooted in our shared experiences and the journey we had undertaken together. We invited only a few close friends, those who had supported us and understood the significance of our bond. The ceremony itself was simple, held in the garden under the same night sky that had witnessed our first confession. Sarah and Liko stood beside me, their hands in mine, their expressions serene and filled with quiet joy. We spoke our vows not in the traditional manner, but in a way that reflected our unique connection. Sarah's voice was steady as she spoke of the promise to explore life's mysteries together, to seek out new experiences and cherish each shared moment. Liko's words were a mixture of playful affection and heartfelt emotion, as she vowed to always find joy in the simple things, and to love without hesitation, without fear. When it was my turn, I found myself struggling to contain the depth of what I felt. "I promise to love you both," I said, my voice steady but thick with emotion, "in every way that I can for as long as we have. Whether it's here on Earth or somewhere among the stars, I'll be by your side." As we exchanged our final vows, the world seemed to fall away, leaving just the three of us standing there, bound together by more than words could express. It was a moment of pure unity, of an unspoken truth made manifest, a promise that was as vast and enduring as the cosmos itself. And as the night settled in around us, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them not as three beings from different worlds, but as one. Together, we had crossed every boundary, embraced every uncertainty, and found something extraordinary on the other side. It was a journey that had begun with the simple choice to open my home to two alien visitors, and had led to a love that reached beyond the stars, a bond that would forever be our guiding light in the darkness. The future, for all its unknowns, was no longer something to fear. It was a vast expanse waiting to be explored, a journey we would undertake, not as individuals but as a family.